Hi, it's Michael Minkoff, and I'm here with a couple of updates. First off, I started an entirely new podcast because I didn't have enough on my plate already, and I decided what better way to spend my additional extra time away from my 5 children and my 4 paying jobs. I can make another podcast, and so I did. It's called Nothing Human, Being Something Extra. It's also available on Apple and on Spotify and on my website, nothinghumanpodcast.com. So you can go to any of those places and find it. And I have one episode that I released last Thursday. It is called Tragic Story, Comic Ending. And it talks about the conventions of tragedy and comedy from ancient Greece through Shakespeare, even to today. And it also discusses 2 movies. One movie, Uncut Gems, and the other movie, Disaster Artist, The Disaster Artist. And in both of those movies, I was really intrigued by the way that they took those tragic and comic conventions and subverted them, subverted their expectations. That podcast is pretty short. It's a 13-minute episode, but I liked the way it turned out. And the reason I started this separate podcast, and it's not because I have a bunch of additional time, I have a few different ideas floating around in my head that I want to get out there that didn't really fit into the stream of Nothing Human, especially not in this particular series. And so I started this separate podcast, and it's available to you if you want to check it out. I thought it was pretty fun, and I liked the way it worked out. So you might like it too, especially if you like my other stuff. And maybe if you don't like my other stuff, I have no idea. Anyway, so the other update, I have a new article up on my blog. I'm trying to get an article up every month at least on michaelminkoff.com. And this article is about when the angels were created. I have a specific idea of that from my exploration of the scriptures, and I think it is interesting, and I actually think it is significant because it plays into my idea of why Satan fell, which is a question people have. Why did Satan fall? He was created perfect and upright, so how is it even possible for him to fall within a perfect creation? I have a theory about that. It involves the day of the week that angels were created. And so check out that article that I wrote, and then you'll be prepared for next month when I release Why Satan Fell. That article on Why Satan Fell, however, will be available early to my Patreon supporters. And I have a Patreon in order to support me and support my family while I'm doing this work. And it's kind of difficult to do Patreon the way most people do it for me, because I really don't want my material to be exclusive. I've said this hundreds of times at this point, and so you're probably sick of hearing it, but I really do want to freely give. So I am really trying my very best to produce and freely offer all of the work that I do and all the insights and all of the interesting things that God shares with me. I want to share freely with the world. So I do have behind the scenes and updates and things like that on my Patreon. I also have early access to articles and podcasts, even though I really don't like doing that, but I'm doing it in order to have value added for the supporters I already have on Patreon. But honestly, if you're supporting me on Patreon, the reason you're doing it is because you want to make it easier for me to produce material you think is helpful and important so that other people can have access to it. And so in some ways, you're investing in this same mission that I have to be free with this insight and to share freely these things that God has given to me to share. And so if that's something that is interesting to you and you think my work is at all important and you've gained anything from it at all, can you consider, please, to give to my Patreon? It's just $5 a month. It's $60 a year. That's not a lot, but every little bit really does help me and my family so that I can do this work a little more freely and not have to have 4 or 5 or whatever it is at this point, various part-time paying jobs so that I can try and make ends meet. It is a little stressful to do that, as you might imagine, and you could help me a lot to reduce that stress if you want to. And if you can't, that's totally fine. Please just engage with my work, share my work if you think it's helpful, and make sure that other people that you know might also have access to what I am trying to freely produce for the sake of others. So that's that. Third update, I have episode 12 of the Nothing Human podcast, the main podcast, dropping tomorrow, more than likely. This one is on the gifts of the Holy Spirit and the way that they connect to the 3 powers. And It will be specifically useful for Christians attempting to understand their place within the church community and also attempting to find out how they can serve the community. And it will help, I think, to some extent to understand some of the problems that are within denominations as they are. We discussed this briefly in the past, and I just wanted to get a little bit more of a deep dive into how the Holy Spirit's giftings, which are different for different believers, relates to the three powers and how we're supposed to respond to that within the church ecosystems in order to create a greater unity, which is a goal that Jesus has for the church. So if you're interested in that, that should drop tomorrow, as long as I don't completely fail like I did the last time I tried to release an episode a couple of weeks ago. And otherwise, whichever way, I'm going to get it to you as soon as I possibly can, and I think it should be interesting to you. Thank you all so much for your engagement. I know this has been a long-ish video, and so if you've listened to this point through all of my ramblings, I really appreciate it. I will talk to you soon.
Nothing human can be alien to